In this video, air source pumps versus ground source pumps. I've had a lot of questions both in the comments and in private messages as well as emails from people who have been asking me to explain the differences, the benefits, the advantages and the disadvantages. I've needed to conduct some research, which I have done. In fact, later this week, I actually have an appointment with an installer to give me a quote for the installation of a ground source pump. So I do intend to try to find out what I can. I have struggled to get definitive answers from installers of either. I do have to say this. For example, if I were to call a competent gas installation engineer and give him details of the property, the size, the square footage, the ceiling height, the heat loss perimeter, the types of window, the insulation, he would be able to tell me exactly what boiler he would or she would recommend and what allowance to give to ensure that I have a little bit extra without going over the top, because many people do have boilers that are bigger than what they need, and that's actually detrimental because it uses excessive energy, it goes to waste. But I can't seem to get that from most installers. I seem to get a lot of possibly, probably, could be, would be, should be, which I'm not happy with, but I won't apportion that to the actual equipment itself. I'm not really happy with air source pumps, as I have said previously, for the reasons that I've stated. Ground source heat pumps are a different story. So let me explain firstly how they work and the advantages and disadvantages. Now, the advantage of a ground source heat pump is that it takes energy from beneath the surface in the ground, where the temperature is a constant 8 to 12 degrees. So it's more likely to just work consistently regardless of the outdoor temperature through the winter, unlike an air source heat pump. There are two types of ground source heat pump: horizontal and vertical. Horizontal are pipes laid out horizontally around your garden, 1 or 2 meters below the surface, but they do require a large area. For example, a 10 kilowatt system would require approximately 500 square meters, so I've been told. A vertical system has boreholes. It could be 2, 3 or more boreholes depending on the output required from the system, and the boreholes could be between 50 and 150 meters deep. So as you can see, not all locations are ideal. If you're in central London and you wanted a vertical system, you could end up boring through the ceiling of the Piccadilly line, for example. Heat pumps can be installed indoors, say for example a garage. The problem is that an air source heat pump would struggle if it was inside a garage, because in no time it would deplete the heat, the energy from the air within the garage, and then it would have to work so much harder, it would cost more, it would not be as efficient, and its lifespan would be less. How it can be done with an air source heat pump is to have what's called a ducted system. Again, so I've been told, where the heat pump at the side of your garage, you could have an aperture with weatherproof vents so that it could draw air from outside, but the pump is indoors where it is protected from the elements. It doesn't get as cold, it won't freeze, it won't bother your neighbors, but it can still draw in fresh air. So if that's possible for yourselves, it's worth exploring. Whereas a ground source pump, it can work no problem if it's indoors, because it's not drawing its energy from the air. It's simply working as a pump, drawing the fluid, which is antifreeze, that is circulating in the ground, and then that antifreeze warms up. It then goes through a heat exchanger, which then heats up a gas. That gas is then compressed, heating it further, and then it is displaced throughout your heating system, so they're far more effective. Obviously, neither are really suitable for flats, but in my research I have come across companies that actually install ground source heat pumps for an entire block of flats, Now that changes things entirely, because if there's a block of flats that has a large car park, there's access for the machinery, the system can be put in place that would give adequate heating to the entire block. They could allocate one area of the building for the system, and it could be charged as a service charge, whatever, and then the whole block can benefit from communal consistent heat. That's being done. I found a company down in Sussex who are actually doing it. There probably are others elsewhere. If you do that, or if you have anything like that in progress, I'd love to hear from you, because that's definitely worth considering for blocks of flats, subject to being in a location where it could be done, of course. Now, first and foremost, as I said previously, in the UK, there's 26 million homes, of which 14 million are flats and terraced houses. So they're not really ideal candidates for either, unless, with the exception of a communal system for flats. Whether that could be somehow done with certain terraced houses, where there could be a communal system that could actually work for an entire block, I don't know. Maybe in the future. The problem is that out of 26 million homes, only 3.6 million have been built since 1990, 5.5 million since 1980. So if you think that before 1990, definitely before 1980, the insulation on properties was terrible. Up until the 1980s, property was being built without wall insulation, without adequate loft insulation, maybe without double glazing, and even the double glazing at that time was nowhere near as good as what we have now. So drastic insulation is required first. If everyone were to spend their money on insulation rather than ripping out working heating systems, that would have far more effect. But that's not to say that there shouldn't be other options afterwards. However, for ground source heat pumps, retrofit is not really ideal, except for the largest detached properties with easy access, and the value of the property, the running costs of the property, could justify upwards of £30,000 to install a system. It really wouldn't be practical for your average 3-bed detached house on a modern housing estate, even if it were more energy efficient than the older stock. And as I said, the vast majority of property in the UK is very poorly insulated. In my opinion, with what I've researched, if there is going to be a push away from gas, I do believe it should be done incrementally, should not just be done overnight, and people shouldn't be pressured into energy poverty to force them to change away from gas. I think that's morally wrong. But for smaller houses, up to small 3-bed detached houses, for example, my feeling is, even though they cost more to run than gas, they're more energy efficient, and there are a lot of other benefits. Rather than spend £10,000 on an air source heat pump, if it were myself, I would consider an electric combi boiler. And although that costs more to run, it's only going to cost you £2,500, and you could spend that extra on solar panels, which would easily offset the extra cost from gas. In fact, it would end up costing you less from my sums, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because that would definitely supply enough heat for the property, and it wouldn't cost you, with the same money that you would spend on an air source heat pump, with all of the issues that you could have, then you could literally have an electric combi boiler, no gas. It can be fitted anywhere in the property, no moving parts, silent, doesn't require servicing, and although it costs more to run, X amount of solar panels, whether it's a 3 or 4 or 5 kilowatt system, that would be enough to offset the extra, and you wouldn't have any problem. Electric combi boilers don't work for larger properties, because the energy that they require would be in excess of the supply to a property. The average property has a supply of 60 amps, and a 14 kilowatt electric combi boiler would require 48, I think, somewhere around there. So as you can see, if you wanted a larger one, then that requires a higher supply to the property and its additional expense and so on. But certainly perhaps for 1 or 2 bed flats, or 1 or 2 bed houses, it could be a potential option. And I do believe that they could be improved upon to the point where they cost no more to run than a gas boiler. And for me, if they cost no more than a gas boiler, electric combi boiler would be a no-brainer. If you do install ground source heat pumps, I'd love to hear from you. I'd even be happy to partake in a Zoom meeting with you so that you could answer all of the many questions that I've had, because people want to know and be able to make an informed decision. I hope this has helped, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.